Home to nearly 90 million souls, Iran projects the image of a rising regional power, sprawling megacities, massive infrastructure, and industrial ambition. But beneath its streets, something far more dangerous is unfolding. The country isn't just sinking, and this isn't mere nature's whim. It is a slow, irreversible man-made apocalypse. Satellite measurements reveal an alarming reality. Land in the Verimin Plain, just south of Tehran, is subsiding at up to 10 inches per year, nearly 100 times faster than Venice. No earthquake is to blame. This is a gradual demolition happening in plain sight. The process is brutally simple. Soil behaves like a sponge. When underground layers are saturated, they support what's built above them. But when groundwater is aggressively extracted, those layers dry out, compress, and permanently collapse. Once crushed, the land cannot rebound. The water didn't evaporate, it was taken. For decades, officials ignored repeated warnings from hydrologists and geologists. In pursuit of food self-sufficiency at any cost, the state built more than 600 dams and allowed tens of thousands of legal and illegal wells to drain ancient aquifers across Isfahan Fars province and beyond. These reserves took thousands of years to form. They were emptied in a generation. When you combine this kind of mismanagement with rapidly drying climate, you get a recipe for disaster. The state treated the aquifer like an infinite bank account, but now the check has bounced. The consequences are terrifying. Expanding fissures already threaten the Tehran-Mashhad Railway, a critical artery for millions of people. In Tehran, the ground beneath Tehran International Airport is deforming. Buildings tilt, roads fracture. Water, gas, and sewage networks rupture as the earth shifts unpredictably below them. Here's the most disturbing twist. This devastation is permanent. You cannot refill the crushed ground. Even if water use stopped tomorrow, much of the land is already lost. The worst part, though, is that new studies warn that this massive depletion increases seismic vulnerability, potentially triggering earthquakes in a region already riddled with faults. The drive for total independence was meant to secure the nation's future. Instead, it created a slow burn catastrophe. The ground itself is now pushing back. Now the question isn't if Iran can claw back from the abyss. It's this. How long until the land snaps? When it finally breaks, millions of climate refugees will have nowhere to go but out, destabilizing the entire Middle East. Miami's luxury towers have everything. Car elevators, rooftop pools, celebrity neighborhoods, and something completely unexpected called gradual descent. A new study shows dozens of beachfront high-rises are slowly sinking into the ground. Just a couple of inches over a few years and still moving. What's going on? And is it gonna get worse? Let's find out. When you look at a map of South Florida, the city of Miami is mostly on the mainland. Just off the coast lies a long barrier island. That's Miami Beach, the stretch you see in most drone shots and travel clips. Fancy cars, the beach, the clubs, the glass towers right next to the water. That's all on this island. But it didn't always look like that. For a long time, this area was mostly older hotels and simple apartment buildings. As prices went up and richer buyers started chasing ocean views, developers began knocking those down and putting luxury high-rises in their place. Floor by floor, that island turned into a narrow wall of glass facing the Atlantic Ocean. Now, here's the problem. Miami Beach sits only 4 to 5 feet above sea level. That's barely enough height for comfort. Each fall, king tides push water up through drains and across certain streets on bright, clear days. The flooding sometimes gets so bad that locals could kayak through parking lots for fun. That might sound like a funny video, but for researchers, it raised a serious question. Could the same landscape be shifting beneath the towers too? Some buildings had already shown signs of movement, and the question became whether the ground itself was still settling under all that concrete and steel. To find out, scientists used a method called INSAR, which stands for Interferometric Synthetic Aperture Radar. It works by having satellites scan the same spot on Earth over and over using radar to detect tiny changes in elevation. It's like watching a tower in slow motion from space, tracking whether it holds steady or slowly sinks. Those scans stack hundreds of satellite passes over the same balcony corners and roof edges. It's the same kind of radar NASA uses to track volcanoes and ground shifts. With enough images, researchers can spot motion as small as the thickness of a credit card. Between 2016 and 2023, they focused on this section of coastline from Sunny Isles to Miami Beach. The data showed that at least 35 high-rise buildings had moved downward over that period. In some cases, the ground had dropped just under an inch. In others, it was closer to 3. That may not seem like much, but over a short time, and in structures this heavy, it means something's off. These weren't new buildings under construction. Most were already finished, which makes the continued movement unusual. In theory, they should have settled and stopped, but they didn't. So what exactly is making the ground sink under these towers? Let's look underground, specifically right under these nice-looking buildings. Beneath the island is a mix of sand and Miami limestone. It is strong enough to build on, but it behaves more like hardened coral than solid mountain rock. Water moves through it, pressure moves through it, and sometimes the ground shifts in ways engineers can't properly predict. One possible explanation is something called creep deformation. It sounds like a villain from a B-movie, but it's actually a slow-motion rearranging of particles under constant pressure. Imagine parking a heavy truck on soft ground. It makes little dents right away, but if the truck stays there for a long time, those dents slowly get deeper. The ground keeps squishing a tiny bit at a time. That slow squishing is what might be happening under these buildings. But it's not just the weight. Construction itself can wake the ground up. Pile drivers, excavation, and heavy machinery can shake the sandy layers enough that older buildings nearby start shifting again. The study also found that some of the newer towers showed stronger movement overall, likely because the soil beneath them was still adjusting after recent construction. And then there's the water. The limestone underneath acts like a sponge, soaking up water from the ocean below and the rain above. When that water moves around, it quietly eats away at the rock and shifts the sand that holds everything up. That's how the ground slowly loosens. So, we have a spongy ground, heavy buildings, and the constant shaking from construction. Plus, water flowing through the rock. Over time, all of that adds up. It presses down just a little at first, then a little more. We're only talking inches, but even small uneven shifts can be enough to make engineers nervous. So, what does this mean for the buildings and all the people making social media reels? Probably, and hopefully, nothing. At least not tomorrow. We're still far away from disaster movie scenarios. Structures won't topple over. There won't be sudden sinkholes swallowing cars. It's not how it works. But this problem does raise some eyebrows, especially after what happened just a few miles north in Surfside. In 2021, the Champlain Towers South partially collapsed. It was a huge tragedy that Miami will remember forever. That disaster didn't happen just because the ground moved. Issues kept piling up slowly over the years. Engineers discovered cracks, rust, and bad drainage. The building was falling apart from all sides, and then it was too late to do anything about it. But since then, the city has been paying more attention. Engineers are reassessing older buildings near the coast, and local officials are pushing for stricter inspections. The radar data doesn't mean a building is unsafe, but it can be an early warning. A signal that something deserves a closer look. For residents, though, there's a catch. Right now, there's no rule that says developers or building managers have to monitor ground movement with satellite scans. The study didn't involve teams going inside or taking core samples. It was just a space-based scan from above. If you zoom out from the sinking tower drama and look at that long strip of land, it's already one of the weirdest pieces of real estate on the planet. A good portion of the Miami lifestyle is literally fake land. Star Island, palm, hibiscus, The Venetian chain and a bunch of other spots started as sand at the bottom of Biscayne Bay. The bay was dredged in the 1920s. The sand was piled into islands, and developers turned those piles into celebrity neighborhoods where houses now cost tens of millions of dollars. Some of the richest people on Earth treat this area like their private game board. Fisher Island, just off South Beach, currently has the most expensive zip code in the United States, with a median listing price in the 8-figure range. A bit farther up sits Indian Creek, known as the Billionaire Bunker. It has only 41 houses, its own police force, and neighbors like Jeff Bezos and Tom Brady. One empty 1.8-acre lot there was recently listed for around $200 million, just for the dirt and the view. And all of this floats along the edge of Biscayne Bay, next to an actual national park full of beautiful marine creatures like dolphins, manatees, and sea turtles. More than 100 bottlenose dolphins live in and around the bay year-round, racing past boat docks and tall condos, like they're extras in someone else's movie. So, what happens next? Engineers keep scanning, inspectors keep checking, and everyone online keeps posting drone shots like nothing odd is happening under their feet. That's Miami, a strange blend of glamour and physics that never quite behaves. It's not a crisis, it's a maintenance routine. As long as the people in charge pay attention to quieter signals like slow dips in elevation or small structural changes, the skyline should hold. Maybe it settles a bit, maybe it stretches and groans. Now that engineers and scientists are aware of this issue, they can prepare and propose solutions. Until then, the towers will still be up and the bay will still shine bright. The whole city will keep drifting in its own style, just slightly downward. They were digging a well when they hit something that made them stop mid-swing. Their shovels struck stone, and as they cleared the dirt away, the farmers saw blocks, lined up like bricks in a fortress wall. It happened in Texas in 1852. But to this day, there's no single explanation for something that looks like a secret buried city beneath quiet streets and front lawns. The diggers who found the well said that the structure stretched for miles. In some places, it dropped dozens of feet below the surface. The stones looked strangely orderly, almost like someone had stacked them, and in certain places, the shapes even formed arches. Other sections looked like windows or steps climbing upward. Before long, people started calling it the Great Wall of Texas. And the story spread quickly. Farmers, builders, and curious locals all grabbed shovels and started digging around, hoping to figure out what it really was. And that's when they noticed that the blocks seemed separated by seams that looked suspiciously like mortar. It was really hard to believe that nature could stack limestone into right angles and parallel lines like this. Then, things got even stranger. In 1886, a local newspaper wrote about a massive petrified skull found near the wall. They also mentioned underground chambers, lost rooms beneath Texas soil, and relics of something powerful and old. And then, almost as quickly as it appeared, the story vanished from print. There were no follow-up articles, no skull preserved in a museum, no official investigation that anyone could point to. It was as if the story had quietly slipped out of existence. People got even more intrigued and wanted to know if someone had suppressed all the info about the find on purpose. Someone suggested that some powerful institutions had quietly removed artifacts. Over time, theories piled up. Lost civilizations, ancient giants, even a North American counterpart to the Great Pyramid. But then, modern science stepped in with drilling rigs. Geologists drilled deep into the formation and pulled out samples of the rock. Then, they ran paleomagnetic tests. When rocks form, tiny magnetic minerals inside them line up with Earth's magnetic field at that moment, almost like microscopic compass needles frozen in place. If workers had cut these blocks somewhere else, maybe dug them out of a quarry, and then transported and assembled them into a wall, the magnetic patterns inside the rocks would have pointed in different directions. Each block would carry the signature of the place where it originally formed, but every sample had the same magnetic orientation, which means the stone formed exactly where it sits today. Researchers figured out the wall was made of rare limestone. This material can fracture in surprisingly straight lines as it hardens underground. Over long periods, erosion opens up those fractures, and they can look exactly like human-made walls. It's like mud. When it dries, it splits into neat geometric patterns. Now imagine the same process happening underground, slowly over millions of years on a much larger scale. Today, the scientists are sure that the rock wall formation developed naturally. It only seems constructed by humans. Recently, a family whose ancestors were early rock wall settlers donated a piece of land to the city that has the original site where the wall was excavated. And because the interest in the place lives on, the city authorities plan to make the original wall accessible to the public. The rock wall isn't alone. In 1968, 3 divers spotted large rectangular limestone blocks near North Bimini in the Bahamas. The blocks were in a straight line stretching about a half a mile. Divers called it the Bimini Road. It consists of massive angular blocks of limestone. Some of those blocks are up to 13 feet long. Many of the blocks look like they once had right-angled corners, as if someone cut them and placed them there with purpose. The 3 divers found this construction when the world buzzed with interest in Atlantis. So headlines immediately connected the dots and were seriously asking whether this could be the first physical trace of Plato's legendary civilization. We still don't have any archaeological evidence to confirm it actually existed, but the timing and the shape of the Bimini stones made many people believe that was it. But then, geologists explained that beach rock forms when sand, shell fragments, and other coastal sediments cement together in warm, shallow water. The Bimini blocks consist of small mud pellets, grains of sand, shell pieces, remains of tiny single-celled marine organisms, and fragments of algae. Over time, chemical reactions bound these materials into solid limestone sheets. Natural fractures split the sheets into rectangular blocks. As sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age, water gradually submerged the formation. Waves and currents eroded the sand beneath parts of it and made some blocks look slightly elevated or recessed. Then, researchers did radiocarbon dating on rock samples, shells embedded with them, and the carbonate cement holding everything together. That's how they found out that the stones were roughly 2,000 years old. It's way after Atlantis' supposed demise 12,000 years ago. So no, the Bimini Road doesn't lead to Atlantis. But it helps scientists better understand how coastlines evolve, how sediment hardens, and how rising seas reshape continents. There's another mysterious structure that might have to do with Atlantis. Meet the Eye of the Sahara, or more officially, the Richat structure in Mauritania. From space, it looks like a 25-mile-wide bullseye carved into the desert. Concentric rings ripple outward like someone dropped a cosmic pebble. People who saw it first thought it was a spot left by a meteor impact. And a new theory links it to Atlantis. They say it looks exactly how Plato described it, with a center island with 3 rings of water and 3 rings of land around it. The Eye of the Sahara sits totally dry right now, but imagine if you dropped it down to sea level. Ocean water would rush in and fill those dips, and boom! You get something that looks a whole lot like Plato's famous city. On top of that, the size seems pretty close. Plato said the main part of Atlantis measured about 11 miles across, and the Richat structure measures roughly 13 miles wide. But wait, Atlantis famously sank into the ocean, so for this to work, the eye had to sit right at sea level a long time ago. The fans of this idea claim that this whole chunk of northwest Africa slowly pushed upward over the last 11,000 years. They say it sat right at the ocean's edge way back around 9,600 BCE, which is exactly when Plato's story takes place. To back this up, they point out tons of salt inside the rings in satellite pictures, saying this proves ocean water used to sit right there. They also see sand all around the eye that looks like a giant wave washed over it. A huge wave like that would totally wipe out any city sitting there, just like the wave that supposedly sank Atlantis. It all sounds pretty convincing, but actual scientists and historians totally disagree. Because when you look closely, the facts just fall apart. Yes, the eye has 3 clear ridges, but if you measure all 3, the whole thing stretches way bigger than 13 miles. On the flip side, if you only measure out to 13 miles, you have to leave out the third ridge entirely. So it doesn't actually match Plato's description perfectly, since you simply can't have it both ways. Modern satellite images show that the eye formed from uplifted rock layers that were pushed upward by molten material beneath the surface. Wind and water erosion then peeled back those layers like an onion over at least 100 million years. The oldest rocks sit in the center. Younger layers ring outward. It's a geological dome, not a crater, not a city. Inside the structure, scientists found igneous rocks, hardened magma, and sedimentary layers twisted by immense pressure. Hot water chemically changed the rocks and left additional signatures. Ancient stone tools also scatter across the region, showing that early humans once passed through. This site is now among the most significant geological heritage locations on Earth. Deep inside an icy cave in Romania, scientists drilled out a 5,000-year-old layer of ice. Inside, a cold-loving bacterium was sleeping. It came back to life and shrugged off some of our strongest antibiotics. So if ice can preserve something like that, are we in danger as the planet warms and more old ice starts melting? Ice is like a library that files winters. Every new snowfall or drip of water that freezes adds a fresh layer. Scientists can slice through those layers to see what was blowing in the wind at the time. They find trapped dust, old pollen, or even stray microbes. The polar ice sheets are the biggest library of this kind on Earth, with books that stretch back over 800,000 years. But you do not have to travel to the Antarctic to find ancient ice. The planet has plenty of hidden underground freezers. One of the largest is the Scari Shoara ice cave in Romania. Tucked deep inside a limestone mountain, this cavern holds over 3.5 million cubic feet of solid ice. Getting down there is an adventure. Researchers descend a steep metal staircase about 160 feet into the cave. Standing on the frozen floor, they use hollow drills to carve out giant tubes of ice. Once, they pulled out a single core roughly 83 feet long, or about the height of an 8-story building. That ice dated back 13,000 years, long before human civilization. But the real surprise was the bacterium they found trapped inside. Bacteria are single tiny cells, basically microscopic bags of chemical reactions. They multiply by copying their DNA and splitting in half. This is a process called binary fission. If conditions are right, they can double their numbers in 20 minutes flat. Most bacteria that can infect us like it warm. Around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit is their comfort zone, but the one from the Romanian cave belongs to a different kind. The name is foreboding: Psychrobacter. But don't worry, that only means it prefers cold temperatures. It does best in cold, fridge-like temperatures. Our body would be like a sauna for it, but that doesn't mean it's harmless to us. Ice preserves things by hitting the absolute pause button. Deprived of liquid water, the chemical reactions that normally break a cell down come to a complete halt. As long as the deep freeze keeps the cell intact, the germ can survive on standby for millennia. But give it some warmth and fresh nutrients in the lab and it wakes right back up. Scientists tested this strain against 28 antibiotics. It resisted 10 of them. The other 18 still worked, at least to some degree. But 10 failures out of 28 are enough to make scientists pay attention. Then they looked at its DNA. Inside, they found over 100 genes linked to antibiotic resistance, along with almost 600 genes we don't fully understand yet. There's also an important detail. Because this bacterium isn't common, scientists had to compare its behavior with that of similar species. So the resistance is real, but we cannot directly translate it into this is what would happen in a hospital. In lab experiments, the tiny germ showed it could actively interfere with other microbes. Researchers identified 11 specific genes in its DNA that are linked to producing compounds that may suppress or inhibit bacteria, fungi, and possibly even viruses. In simple terms, it's like a small soldier wearing armor. That's antibiotic resistance, but it also carries a few spray cans in its backpack that can damage other microbes. That's not unusual in nature. Microbes constantly compete, and many survive by making molecules that harm their rivals. That's actually how many of our antibiotics were discovered in the first place. So this strain carries two important traits. It can tolerate some antibiotics, and it may produce its own antimicrobial compounds. That combination doesn't make it some unstoppable organism that can eliminate the human race. But it does mean it carries biological tools that had evolved long before humans started making medicine. Here's what makes bacteria like this potentially problematic. Not because it can sprint into your bloodstream and establish a new colony there. It's not built for human body heat. The real headache comes from how bacteria behave around each other. They actively trade genetic upgrades, not like football players trading jerseys. More like coaches exchanging playbooks and learning new tactics. Bacteria pass around tiny DNA rings called plasmids, which contain bonus survival instructions. Other times, germs simply pick up loose genetic code from their surroundings, like finding a dropped wallet. The bottom line? We don't want these antibiotic genes to somehow end up inside a modern bacterium that thrives in humans. Creating a supergerm takes a wildly unlucky chain of events. The ancient germ has to meet a modern one to hand over its DNA. Then the new host has to actually assimilate it. Most of the time, that process fails, but the planet getting warmer could change how often these accidental meetups happen. More mixing means more chances for those upgrades. And we don't have to guess how thaw can cause trouble, because we've already seen a real-world example. In 2016, a heat wave hit the Yamal Peninsula in Siberia, with reports of temperatures around 95 degrees Fahrenheit, which is basically beach weather for a place that's supposed to stay frozen. Soon after, an anthrax outbreak showed up in local reindeer, and there were human infections too. Anthrax is a disease caused by a bacterium called Bacillus anthracis. This bacterium has a survival trick. When conditions get tough, it can turn into a spore. It enters sleep mode and stays like that for decades. The heat helped thaw and disturbed ground that had kept those spores sealed off. And once grazing animals ran into them, the whole cycle started up again. But bacteria aren't the only microbes that cold can preserve. Viruses can make it through too. Scientists have actually pulled ancient giant viruses out of Siberian permafrost. They earned that name for a very literal reason. Normal viruses are so incredibly tiny that you need a highly advanced electron microscope just to see a blurry outline. Giant viruses are huge in comparison. They are physically larger than some bacteria. You could easily spot them using a basic high school microscope, and after 30,000 years inside a cube of ice, researchers successfully revived them. The viruses immediately invaded living cells and started making copies of themselves. To play it safe, the team used simple amoebas as test dummies instead of human cells. But if this can be done with a virus so old, could there be other viruses in permafrost? Maybe something that targets animals or even humans? The short answer is precisely that. Maybe. But hold on, there's no need for a bunker just yet. Viruses are biological specialists. They're extremely picky eaters. To infect a cell, a virus has to latch on to the outside like a key fitting into a lock. A virus designed to infect a woolly mammoth or a prehistoric amoeba probably has the wrong key for a human cell. Our biology is just different enough that the door stays locked. That said, we aren't totally in the clear. Scientists have found genetic traces of things we do know, like the 1918 Spanish flu and even smallpox, preserved in permafrost and frozen remains. But finding broken pieces of genetic code is very different from finding a fully functional virus that can boot up and start an infection. Most of the time, age and background radiation turn these things into harmless leftovers. The realistic threat is not an apocalyptic zombie plague. It's an ecosystem disruption. If massive amounts of ancient microbes flood the ocean, they might mess up the bottom of the food chain, knock out a specific plankton, and starving fish create a ripple effect that hits bigger animals. Melting ice is a slow-motion issue that plays out over centuries. Science and medicine are wide awake and watching. Humanity already has plenty of daily troubles, so prehistoric germs belong near the bottom of your worry list.
So, some scientists drilled through the seafloor off the U.S. East Coast only to find more water. But this time, it's the kind of water we can actually drink. And that's a big deal, because this new freshwater reservoir could supply a metropolis the size of New York City for the next 800 years. Now, the team is confused. They're trying to figure out how a giant freshwater system ended up under the ocean, and more importantly, how it stayed hidden from us for over 20,000 years. Okay, to be fair, scientists have suspected there's fresh water under the seafloor since the late 1960s. But only recently, researchers actually got on a boat to follow up on those reports. They named the mission Expedition 501, and they had one goal: drill to the bottom of the ocean and see what was really hiding down there. So those scientists drilled about 1,300 feet down off the coast of Massachusetts. And once they got that deep, they hit a thick layer of sediment that was basically soaked with fresh water. Now, that freshwater layer sat below the saltier sediment, and above it, there was a tight lid made of clay and silt, material that doesn't really let water pass through. This seal is strong enough to keep the two layers separated. So, up top, you got seawater, and down below, fresh water. The drilling process took about 3 months. In that time, they pulled up 13,200 gallons of water from 3 different spots beneath the seafloor, just off Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. They're still analyzing the results, but early reports suggest this reservoir might be much bigger than they previously thought. It could stretch from offshore New Jersey all the way north to Maine. Now, despite its size, it did a pretty good job hiding from us. Now, scientists are trying to figure out when and how this reservoir was formed. And back in 2003, one study suggested fresh water could get trapped under the ocean in at least 3 different ways. Theory number 1: tall mountains near the ocean can funnel rainwater straight down from higher elevations and into the seabed. Theory number 2: a hidden reservoir can form if sea levels stay very low for a long time and rainwater seeps into the ground. Then, when sea levels rise again over hundreds of thousands of years, that fresh water can get trapped in the sediment underneath. And theory number 3, which is connected to the one before, is that a freshwater reservoir can form under the ocean when ice sheets grow and sea levels drop. At the bottom of the ice sheet, the ice slides over solid rock, known as bedrock. As the ice scrapes and grinds against this rock, it creates heat, which melts some of the ice. That melted water collects at the base of the ice sheet. Then, because the ice is extremely heavy, it pushes the water down into the ground. Over time, the water gets trapped under layers of sediment. Well, more than 20 years later, scientists are finally close to an answer. The mountain theory is basically ruled out here because of the geography of New England. There are no large high mountain ranges right next to the coast. But the glacier theory could make sense. Their hypothesis is that the fresh water in this reservoir came from glaciers at some point during the last ice age, which lasted from about 2.6 million to 11,000 years ago. Still, it's not a final answer. The team is now studying the reservoir in much more detail. They're still analyzing things like microbes, rare earth elements, and the pore space in the sediment. All of that can help researchers estimate the reservoir's size more precisely. The age of the sediments can also narrow down when exactly it formed, and knowing its origin will help reveal how those systems have evolved over time. We just have to wait a little longer. But one thing is certain, there really is fresh water under the ocean. And when you think about that, it's hard not to wonder, wouldn't some salt get mixed in? And yeah, that can happen. So let's take a look at the map. Here's the reservoir. The farther you go from the coast, the saltier the water gets, and that doesn't matter much to us because it's not safe to drink anyway. But the closer you get to the coast, the less salt there is. The drill site closest to Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard showed that out of every 1,000 parts of water, only 1 part is salt, so it's considered safe. You can drink it, cook with it, and take a bath in it. But why does all of this actually matter? Well, because fresh water is becoming a big problem around the world. I mean, the lack of it. A new United Nations report talks about a global water bankruptcy. They say we've hit a new and pretty worrying stage. More and more river basins and underground water sources, called aquifers, can't go back to their historical normal. Droughts and shortages are becoming more permanent, completely changing what life looks like in some places. For example, the Aral Sea. This was once the world's 3rd largest lake and looked like this back in the 1980s. And this is how it looks today. It's completely dried out. It's not just there. More than half of the world's large lakes have lost water since the early 1990s. And Central Europe has lost 39% of its glacier ice in little over 20 years. So even now, over 1 billion people around the world still don't have access to fresh water. And estimates say that in just 5 years, demand will be 40% higher than supply. That's why this finding is such a huge deal. It doesn't mean we're about to start pumping water from under the ocean tomorrow. But it does mean we might have backup options in the future, especially for big coastal cities. That's exactly the goal of Expedition 501. And it's not just in the U.S. This group is part of a much larger international science program called the International Ocean Discovery Program, or IODP. Their goal is basically to drill deep into the seafloor to understand how Earth works, its climate, its geology, and in this case, its hidden water systems. This expedition came after decades of unanswered questions. Like we mentioned earlier, researchers had hints of fresh water under the seafloor for decades. Those hints came from strange electromagnetic signals and seismic data. But back then, the technology just wasn't good enough to confirm it. So the idea stayed on paper for a long time. Everything changed when modern drilling came into play. Expedition 501 literally drills straight down through the seafloor and pulls up sediment samples. And this process normally takes days to months. Is it safe, though? Well, they say the ship that carries the drilling rig follows international rules to protect the environment. They're also taking every precaution to make sure no solid or liquid material is dumped into the sea during the work. Their new finding off the East Coast is only the beginning. For now, it's the largest one of its kind. But scientists believe there may be still many hidden reservoirs out there around the world. Similar expeditions are planned or already happening near other parts of the world. Soon, scientists might find new reservoirs off the coasts of Indonesia, Australia, and even South Africa. So, Expedition 501 is basically about mapping these hidden freshwater reservoirs and finding out how they form, how stable they are, and whether we can protect them. Because, yeah, they still have a huge technical problem ahead, which is making sure the fresh water doesn't mix with the salty water above and below it. And that really matters if we ever want to use this water in the future, or avoid contaminating aquifers that already exist near the coast. So this expedition is pushing scientists to find answers to a pretty uncomfortable question. If fresh water gets harder and harder to find, what options do we really have left?